Hi.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. Hi, this is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. As usual, I've got Darren Jolly here with me.
Hello.
Today, we are going to talk about a topic that it absolutely connects to some of the stuff we've talked about in the past. Transnational capital, modern day, I almost said modern day slavery again, but, the fact migration and immigration are all kind of tied to this. So today we are going to talk about outsourcing, insourcing, offshoring, nearshoring, and the like. Because pretty much every company out there is doing something along those lines. Manufacturing, it's huge. Services is probably bigger than manufacturing because of, the call centers in India. But they're outsourcing IT services. They're outsourcing all kinds of stuff. And I'm not talking about managed service companies. I'm talking about more along the lines of, huge corporations where that's all they do is manage somebody's IT or somebody's, incoming calls or whatever. So that's what we're talking about today. Another exciting episode of Short Bus Debate Club.
It is exciting. What's this sarcasm lately? You're just talking shit all the time.
I don't think it's lately. I think that's pretty much a standard. So before we go into, the actual stuff where it's being done on a daily basis, I just want to mention something because I think a lot of people think that their job is secure if they're doing something in the service industry, like McDonald's or Taco Bell or whatever. And a while back, and they're just doing this as a test. But if it ends up being successful, then, more of them are going to open up. But there was a McDonald's that basically had employees that cooked the food. And up front, they had nothing but touchscreen terminals. And the drive-through was actually linked to a network, and it had cameras and things like that. And when you pulled up to the drive-through, the person that took your order wasn't even in the same fucking country. They were outsourced. So, even jobs like the service industry, where you think, well, I've got to be there for that, are at risk of possibly being outsourced at some point.
Well, and think about what you just said there. I mean, if anybody listened to that, like, if I'm a number cruncher, a bean counter inside of an institution, and I'm trying to find ways to extract more value for the labor that I'm already paying for, or shorting up, bringing the numbers down, you could, if you do that, you might have a technology that allows you to actually, you could service 4 drive-ins at the same time or something to that effect, where they're literally during downtimes or,
Well, and it's important because, everybody complained, well, minimum wage isn't enough and you need to pay us more. And, so all of these burger places were like, okay, we'll pay you $17 an hour or whatever. Mm-hmm. If that call center or call it the drive-through center is in somewhere like India, then you pay what, 50,000 rupees per hour instead.
It's crazy the differences. I mean, obviously it's going to be like based on a like specific nation specialties, because no matter what, India, like, they have very specific capabilities with regards to the things that they've insourced, just like the Philippines, or like you talk about Vietnam a lot in relation to textiles productions and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like there are very specific things that those countries bring in, therefore they're going to be better at it. Therefore they're thought about production in relation to not having to deal with labor costs because they're not bound by the same constraints that they are in the United States because of our labor laws and because of the labor pressures that come from people internal. So we can sit there and fucking say, and I want you to understand that before I say this, I'm not saying I don't think people should be paid a good wage. Of course, I think everybody, everywhere, all over the world should be paid a good wage. What I'm saying actually is that when you think about things only in terms of the nation state here pushing up those wages, what you're doing is you're effectively changing the way the production is functioning in the United States through these other places where these things can be outsourced, such as, like a drive-through in this instance, or to where they literally don't need anybody on the front counters anymore because you have them all being functioning through technological spaces where you might have one technician in a space making sure that it's all working, smoothly.
Well, and that's kind of what I was going to mention. I mean, and I don't want to go too deep on the technology and all of that stuff, but if you think about it, the way things are going, so again, not in production yet, but they had this like laser robot cooking type thing where really all it took was one technician. Uh-huh. So nobody was cooking burgers. Everything was done automatically.
Really? A laser?
Laser cooked them. And then, the robots were bunning them and flipping them and whatever. So if you combine that with the outsourced drive-through, then there's just one fucking guy at McDonald's.
It's like Bob's Burgers at Futurama or something like that,
Yeah, dude. So, I don't know. I mean, and I'm not saying that's a good thing, but if someone looks at a total cost of ownership and their return on investment, then, even if something costs $150,000, if they can cut, all of those employees down and make it cost less than labor.
This is math. This is really complicated long division when it all comes down to it.
Right. I mean, it's fairly simple, but a lot of people don't understand total cost of ownership and return on investment and things like that.
Well, and the left inside the United States has a really, really horrible habit of being y'all fucking read, the Communist Manifesto, and then you suddenly thought that it was going to be that there was this thing like a capitalist and a laborer that was going to function in the form of the proletariat like it did in the 1840s when it was originally written, when it was written not as a piece of analysis but as a piece of propaganda to try to motivate the British working class to mobilize and to overthrow capitalism in England at that point in time, right? I mean, that was the fucking target audience. It was not us in this day and age, but the left in the United States, they latch onto these ideas like raising wages or something like that, as if that really fucking matters, which you need to do. I mean, first of all, you got to read the canon of Marx if you want to understand it. And you need to understand one really important point. I think it came up in the German ideology, but you cannot make historical conditions in the conditions of your choosing, which means that you need to know how production operates in the current terms. If you do not understand how they operate in the current terms, you cannot effectively change anything. So if you want to affect labor or labor conditions or the production environment, you have to start thinking outside the fucking context of the nation state, because if you keep looking inside of the space, you're assuming that we're protected here, and we are not fucking protected here because production is writ large on a global scale now, whether you like it or not. It's not going to fucking change. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's absolutely not going to change. It's probably going to get worse. That's why I was so pissed off at Mitt Romney, and you and I have talked about this multiple times, but when he first ran for president, he was honest with everybody and said, you know what,
Was it 08 or when did he first run?
And
I remember 12 was when he actually got the nomination.
Right, yeah, so it was 08 because he was honest with people and he said, I can't bring these jobs back.
Mhm.
I am sorry. It's just not going to happen.
But that
But
was such an unpopular.
but we'll do training or we'll, do something so that we get better jobs, Brilliant. That was the most brilliant fucking thing I've seen a politician say in a long time. And then the next fucking presidential election, he's like, yeah, we're bringing those fucking jobs back.
Because it was just too unpopular.
Right.
Well, I don't want to go too far down that path either, but one of the things that concerns me about the education argument is that I do think that it would be humbling for idiots in the United States to slow down and think maybe we don't understand things as well as we do, as well as we think we do, and go and get in a vocational space. Go train yourself to do something. I mean, fuck, I work at the fucking post office. I mean, my job is not super fucking high thoughtful labor. I mean, you got to be there for a while to understand it, but it's still fucking working your fucking ass off, and it's humbling work. But we need to go back to the point where there was something that was said during one of the presidential elections along the lines of educating, and it was who was it that said to go teach yourselves to be coders? Did you hear this line?
Yeah.
It was he was telling fucking like coal miners to go be coders or whoever it was, or maybe it was fucking Hillary, great fucking HRC, the fucking bitchiest bitch in the history of the fucking universe.
No, it wasn't Hillary though. It was fuck. I can picture him like in the front of a coal mine, and unless my brain's just working that way because you said coal mine, and I was like, oh yeah, and then I saw him on a fucking log out in front of the coal mine.
Go teach yourself coding. That was just a really provincial, asshole kind of thing to say to people. But you're not saying for everybody to go and become tech savvy. I mean, you're just saying.
No, there's lots of things. I mean, there's lots of different training you could do. I mean, you could take some sort of plumber training or electrical training or welding.
Which we are sorely in this region short on. Go talk to anybody in those industries. It's funny the conversations you have when you're working on the window at the post office, but they're going to start to command giant wages because there's such a shortage of people that are capable of doing those things pretty quickly.
Well, and in cybersecurity, where I are, there's a fucking shortage. So if you look up cybersecurity, I mean, from the CISO down to the analyst.
Why? Is it because of background checks and shit, or?
No, it's because of training and lack thereof. So it's, and in IT as a whole, there's a shortage. And when we're talking about IT, you can go to school like our friend Roger did and get a degree in IT, or you can go and get certificates in different segments of IT.
So that you're demonstrating proficiency in specific fields.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that way you can just be a coder, or you can be an analyst, or you can be the cybersecurity guy, or you can be a threat hunter, or whatever.
Threat hunter.
Dun, dun, dun. So, but there are shortages in a lot of those areas. So yeah, I mean, that's what I meant by training. I didn't mean that everybody needed to go get a formal education or get a PhD. For that matter, a lot of what you need to learn to get certified, you can get at the fucking library. Those things that lend you books for free.
What do you mean? Whatever do you mean?
Have to have a library card.
There's some cool digital things that are coming up with libraries right now. There's a lot of shit available right now. So, but you're suggesting that there's test preparation stuff that you can take for the tests and then go take the test yourself.
Yeah.
So you can actually go through the process of education without having to pay for somebody else providing the education for the certification. And then you can go take the test.
That is correct. And there's free classes, I mean, they figured out a way to monetize it more, but you can still get free classes off of like Coursera.org or the other one? edx.org or
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to
edx.edu.
trust you on those things. So,
There are free classes there. Harvard, their digital classes, they've got a bunch of free ones, but they also have a bunch that you can pay for. So, I mean, the training is out there.
so to kind of get things back to the outsourcing discussion, when we were talking earlier, and I was kind of looking over some stuff, again, like one of the things that I do just to kind of get a feel for the rhetorical space that's out there that other people are like putting out there with regards to ideas.
Just hold up one second because I got to jump back because it is edx.org. But both edx and Coursera allow you to take classes from any number of universities out there. For instance, you can take a class at MIT and a class at Brown at the same time. You can take a class at the University of Missouri and the University of Nebraska. So it's very cool. And, if you have, thoughts and dreams of attending Ivy League, then in theory, you could attend Ivy League. That's all.
So, education, good out there. But one of the so like
education, good out there.
One of the things that popped up when I was going through, it was the first thing that popped up when I put outsourcing in on YouTube, was there's this little Vietnamese girl from Australia, and this lady had a business, and her business was to set up the capability of a person to outsource to the Philippines, right? So primarily she was dealing with tech stuff like web development and all that kind of. So she had access to labor pools that were inside the Philippines that could do this, and she went through these different levels where you start at level 4 and you go all the way up to level 1. But really, the idea is that you get to the point where you start where you're essentially you have a product that you're putting in the hands of these people and you're paying them to make it based on what it is that you have. Up to the point where you actually make contacts with the labor pools inside of those countries, and you're picking and choosing from the various different and that was her big deal, was that she actually had connections to people that were more than proficient. They had like excellence in specific attributes with regards to these technical fields.
Well, so just real quick, and then you can talk about the little Vietnamese Australian girl. So outsourcing, there's really a big umbrella, but for the most part right now, the terminology goes like this. Outsourcing is generally tech/service type stuff. So IT services, call center, things like that. Okay. Then when you start, even though all of it is outsourcing, but I just wanted to make it clear because some other terminologies might come up on your own research. So outsourcing is generally, those service type things. Offshoring is when you send manufacturing somewhere else. Nearshoring is where you send it somewhere else, but it's closer. So
NAFTA.
Kind of, yeah. So instead of sending it to the Philippines, we send it to Mexico.
Yeah, there's a certain switch that they can make for Toyota's trucks or for GM's,
right,
cars, whatever.
And so that's nearshoring.
Yeah,
and I just thought it was important because, the Vietnamese lady, she's teaching you how to start a business of
through the
outsourcing. So it's that tech stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's finding an algorithm or developing software or, building a call center.
Yeah, or software development. Yeah, or web development was another thing she talked about a bunch.
Right.
But while she was talking about it, it was very clear that she was part of an organization that she was paying a tribute to that helped her to organize her position in relation to the Philippines. So what it turned into, what it really sounded like to me, was a fucking pyramid scheme. She wants to sign people up to do it, and she's the connection, and somebody else did that, and so like she had to pay 3% to them, and then we have to pay, 3% to her, but 1% to them, if you're going to sign up for it. But because people have dreams of, doing things, building, whether it's building things, whether it's having things constructed, or whether it's, you have to, if you're in the United States, if you're just regular you and me, Joe Schmo, you don't have access to uh, connections in those various areas. And people
Right.
have fantasies about, in the same way that people had fantasies of making tons of money in the GameStop thing, people have fantasies of making tons of money in production. So you imagine a product that you can build, and you have to find a way to do that, So, but we're 4 degrees away from the people who are actually doing that. So for us to gain access to it, you have to jump through these hoops that you have to pay huge tributes through to get to.
Well, and you just need to make sure you're jumping through the right hoops. And that's a problem because generally speaking, you've got to have money in order to start searching for the right hoop. And
Yeah, because it costs money to learn that shit.
If you don't have money, then it'll end up costing you a shitload more because you might have to learn the hard way. Like you sign up with some little Vietnamese girl from Australia who you saw online,
Who runs
and
away
then
with
all
your
of a
fucking
sudden
money.
she, took your money and sent you a fucking brochure. And on the brochure, it told you 3 things you need to do or whatever. And, and then you never fucking hear from her again. And I'm not saying that that's her gimmick.
And the only reason because of her name was fucking Vietnamese. So if Chinese names are different, Japanese names are different, Korean names are different. If you're, awake and conscious, around yourself, you should be able to figure out these things in the fucking world. So, she had if your last name is Nguyen, then you're fucking Vietnamese 190% of the time. So
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, so I mean, it's all over the place. When I went to Romania, prior
that was outsourced shit, wasn't it? Kind of.
It was a fucking ton, and that's what I was going to say. Is that prior to them assassinating Ceausescu, he wanted.
These motherfuckers don't even know who that is.
He wanted Bucharest to be this tech capital of Europe.
So they really had that kind of like built into it with him prior.
Oh, fucking A. Like, I mean, all of the schools had, tech, and it was engineering and mathematics and all of that. And, software and all of the things that were done with tech back in the 80s, right? So when I was in Romania, every time I went over there, I met somebody from France or Germany or somewhere that was there because they had outsourced software development, or they paid somebody to develop an algorithm or something along those lines. And the reason is because in Eastern Europe, the cost of labor is less than it is in Western Europe.
Yeah, there's very clear production relations between Western and Eastern Europe.
So it wasn't just Romania; it was the Ukraine. It was
Poland, the whole fucking Czech Republic, the whole. Although they're higher on the.
They're
a little bit.
Yeah, because they're still kind of they're like Poland. Is part Western Europe, right?
Well, I mean, it was technically Eastern then, but we've invested so much shit in them. We have so many military. We have especially with the Ukraine.
Well, no, I meant if you looked at the border,
it was behind the curtain. So
right.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, those are kind of technicalities. I mean, Germany and Poland, they go back and forth so much that that Germany steals Polish soccer players. And people get really pissed about it, and that's true. That's no joke. So because they fight over where the lines are, because the dividing line between Western and Eastern Europe in those spaces is not quite as clear as we'd like these imaginary lines to be sometimes.
Yeah, Belarus is another one where they go and grab tech stuff.
But Belarus is a huge. Now everything's gotten weird because of the Russia-Ukraine stuff. Like Belarus is on Russia's side, so things are very odd with that.
Right. But Russia, at one time, if you were trying to start like an antivirus company or cybersecurity, you were going to Russia to find those hackers because they were just so proficient at busting through somebody's shit. And,
their background in intelligence hasn't been really weak.
Well, I'm not even talking about, people that were former.
I understand that.
Right.
Those, like you were suggesting, these spaces in Romania, like you said, in Bucharest, in Belarus, they had these things that were already in place that were, when you go to a post-Soviet world, allow for transition to a space to where proficiency is going to reflect whatever your technical proficiency was prior to the fall of the wall. So and Russia would have been right at the center of anything like that.
Right.
And it's weird, all the hacking allegations, that when they would be jumping through multiple places, there'd always be ties to Russia, at least the rhetorical disposition. I don't know how true any of it is. I certainly don't want to get in on the rhetorical bullshit against Russia right now that everybody's maintaining. I think things are a lot more complicated with that, so I don't want to. We can talk about the material things as opposed to making value judgments, I guess is what I'm saying. So,
well, the reason that I mentioned, any of the Eastern European countries and their contribution to outsourcing was just to say, it's not just us doing it. It's basically any country that would be considered higher on the food chain than another.
It's interesting. I wonder, like, when Eastern Germany and Western Germany came back together, I wonder how sort of like intelligence sharing sort of like played out. Because I mean, you essentially have two municipalities becoming one, and the Stasi were just fucking a nightmare.
Yeah. I don't know. I've kind of wondered about the intelligence because it wasn't just the Stasi. I mean, the KGB was there too.
Yeah. But they were all fighting with each other. I didn't realize how much infighting there would go on between those different intelligence agencies until much later.
Well, I'm sure a lot of it is like now the CIA and the FBI, saying, oh, well, you can't do this because it's, it's our soil. And the CIA says, well, fuck you, you're over in Uzbekistan or wherever, and that's supposed to be our domain. I'm sure there's a lot of that happens. Maybe not.
Well, people over. I don't want to go down that road. But the people over when they think about things in the United States about the Iron Curtain, they tend to conflate a lot. That's all I was going to say. And the difference between a nation state, like they brought it up in that movie Bridge of Spies a ton. It was really quite an interesting discussion that they brought up. I don't know how technically accurate it was in relation to history, but because things were happening in Eastern Germany, well, in Berlin, Eastern Berlin, they kept pointing. The German intelligence would point to the Russians would point to the East Germans. It was just it's just curious how, like, a nation state is different than, because Germany wanted to get on the same playing field that the Soviets, that Russia and the United States were on. They wanted to be recognized as an equal, but that was never going to fucking happen at that point. So.
I love talking about intelligence and spy type shit. But I think that's a serious tangent at this point.
Well, I'm waiting for you to get done with whatever it is you're doing over there, motherfucker.
I'm trying to clear this fucking search, dude, and it won't go away.
Well, I can definitely go back to outsourcing.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was kind of focused on it, but I was still listening and talking. So, yeah, I mean, the tech stuff in Eastern Europe, and it's just, again, about labor and how much it's going to cost somebody.
They had a base in Romania that, like in your experience, that was strong. So, and what was the currency there at that time?
Well, they used the euro was there, but what the hell was
They were still using their national currency.
You could do both.
Yeah.
and I can't remember
But
what it was.
It was a weak currency relative to the euro or to the dollar.
Oh yeah, I was like rich when I went to Romania. I was,
and that had a big effect on the cost of labor and whatnot in the area.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that I would have been rich if I was in Slovakia too. God damn it, what is the name of their currency?
You'll get there eventually.
It's the RON.
The RON?
RON.
Longo.
Yeah.
RON. Spasiba. Немного. RON.
And it's so basically one of their Romanian RON or leu is 20 cents.
1 in 5. Okay. Or 1 to 4. 1 in 5.
Yeah. So like I said, I mean, I was just a party fucking animal when I was over there, dude.
When I started looking at outsourcing, it was when the globalization discussion first emerged in college, right? And we read these stupid books, like this fucking book by Thomas Friedman called The Lexus and the Olive Tree, which it was sort of that. It was rooted in the idea. I think he had it in the previous book, but it was the golden arches thing. Anywhere where there's a fucking McDonald's, the U.S. doesn't fire bombs. I mean, it's the idea that we had problems with people that have big religious positions, fundamentalist religious positions, and if they don't recognize the economic investment side of things, because they were all about the rhetorical spaces. It was all the neoliberal, just open up your borders. We need to be able to move capital. We need to be able to take to free them up from labor constraints, because labor costs too much in the United States. There's other ways to make money. But as time went on, boy, they tried to get everybody to drink the fucking Kool-Aid, but the facts were the facts.
Well, so, right before we clicked record here, you started talking about insourcing here in the United States. And I don't want to say that we're done with the outsourcing thing, because there are lots of things that are outsourced, offshored or nearshored. I mean, clothing, towels, any sort of textile, cars, all of that shit.
You'd be hard pressed to find any production line that you can't deal with internal to a specific geographic location any longer.
Right, because even if like now, a lot of the Nissans are made here in Tennessee, and a lot of the GMs are still made up in Detroit or somewhere in Michigan, but the parts, are probably made somewhere else, in Japan or
in the introduction of
wherever.
That book, Lexus and Olive Tree, he actually took Toyota, GM, and it was a German company. I can't remember what it was, but he said, "You think that these cars are American? You think these cars are Japanese? You think these cars are German?" And he said, "The parts are produced in 237 different countries, and they're put together in 142 of them."
Right. So. And that's why the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States said, you can't necessarily say made in the USA anymore. You can say assembled or fully assembled in the USA, which always makes me laugh. Like I think it was Keen boots, and it says assembled in the USA, which means that, I don't know, what, they got the fucking sole from somewhere and the tongue from somewhere,
or they just had all the pieces put together in a plastic bag and they just sent it to the United States, and
right,
when they're all together.
Yeah, I don't know how the fuck that worked, and it might not have been Keen boots, but I know it was a pair of boots.
I mean, it's the point, it's just insane. It's to think about the concept, like when we were growing up. You remember that movie Gung Ho?
Yeah.
So that was about like when Japan was starting to move like small amounts of sites of production in the United States. It was not big at all, but like the relative hatred of production positions towards the Japanese. I mean, like I remember being like young and like, because my parents subscribed to a certain, disposition, they, Japanese this and blah, 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 and made in America,
Right.
America.
Buy American.
Those days are just so gone. I mean, it just doesn't even make any sense anymore.
Well, and when they do say it's generally a lie. And when I was doing my research for a lot of this stuff, I started going down some fucking rabbit holes, and I figured we'd better just keep it vague because there's laws on the books that say, okay, it's got to be this much, and it's a percentage, and this much,
For
and
what
then
constitutes
this is going to be a
sustainment in
tariff.
America?
This is going to be a tariff idea, and this isn't. And you're going to pay this much, like 30 fucking 5% tax on this part. And I mean, it just started getting out of control, like to where you had to be a fucking accountant and, maybe a CEO.
Tax lawyer.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very
maybe a
lawyer.
lawyer. Yeah.
I actually had a guy come into the post office 6-7 years ago, and he had sent something out of the United States. He was doing it on a business level, right? And it wasn't just like a sample, because there's differences between if you send just samples to places and you send something that you're actually trying to extract value from, right?
Right.
And he had it sent back because they required tariffs because of the value of the item and blah, blah, this. And he said, well, you guys should know that. I said, are you out of your fucking mind?
Do you know how much shit we send every day?
Well, and not only that, because I just on a whim, because my background's in political economy. So I'm like, well, let me go see if I can figure out how to calculate something to send to somewhere easy, to Canada. Just to something simple, not like something that they export, so something that's like a U.S. thing. I can't remember what it was that I looked at, but I tried to figure it out, and when you got to the mathematical equation where you had to divide this and add that and blah blah this and the value of this in relation to that, I was like, I said, that's fucking Canada. How do you deal with this when you're dealing with like mass production positions from Vietnam or from
Dude, it was
from
fucking
anywhere,
crazy.
Honduras.
And like this part wasn't taxed on profit. This part was taxed on, like a flat sort of thing, and this part here was taxed on profit. So, you've got all of these different things and you got to break them down. And I figured that was just too much information anyway, so I didn't even bother with it. But
when I looked at it for Canada, it was too much information for me. So I agree with that.
Yeah. But I mean, just I did more research, just easy stuff, to give you guys an idea of kind of what we're talking about. So
like where things are produced and whatnot.
Yeah, so like I've got some Nordstrom pajama pants. They're made in India. My Fruit of the Loom t-shirt. These are the t-shirts that are pocketed. Not undershirts, but t-shirts that you can wear outside or whatever. Was made in El Salvador. My Eddie Bauer hoodie was made in Vietnam. My undershirts by Hanes were made in the Dominican Republic.
They make good stuff in the Dominican Republic.
Fuck yeah, those guys know what they're doing. Baseball players and undershirts.
Prostitutes.
What? My towels were made in Turkey. My jean jacket and my coat by Levi's were made in China, but the jeans themselves were made in Mexico, which I thought was fucking weird. Like,
why? Oh, like the Levi,
right. So Levi's jeans are made in Mexico, but their jackets are made in China.
But that's they just they're gonna find the best production position. They know what they're.
I know, but if you've got, I don't know. I just figured if
that's the whole point. We assume a ton of things with regards to this, but it's fucking crazy.
If you had one contract with somebody that's already making your shit, you'd figure you'd be able to weasel a better price. But whatever.
Maybe not.
So LL Bean, my jacket was made in Cambodia. My Columbia jacket was made in Bangladesh. My North Face gloves were made in China. I only looked at 4 of my dress shirts. 2 of them were made in Sri Lanka and 2 in Indonesia, and they were Lauren by Ralph Lauren. My Lauren sport coats, I only looked at 2 of them. One was made in Jordan, which I thought was odd, and then the other one was made in China.
So you got like 12, 13 different items there, and I counted, because of the doubles there, I count 12 or 13 municipalities.
Yeah.
Which doesn't even, and that's when it says made there, we don't even know that it's entirely, and I understand they're close, but
Oh, you mean like who's looming the shit? Like, is the thread made there and that kind
the
of
whole
thing?
fucking thing. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is that it's probably even more complicated than that when you get right down to brass tacks. I was listening to something on the news the other day. Not on the news. It was on some other podcast, but they were talking about where the coffee break came from.
Oh, the break, like at work.
Yeah, because during World War II, right before the rise of U.S. production, of U.S. When all the guys went to war, there was a tie factory in Denver, right? Where they would loom the fucking ties. It was super high end ties. And when they left, they had old guys come in and do it, but they were too fucking. Their hands weren't good and they were old and worthless, so they brought in women, and they were just doing math in relation to it, and the production would go down at a certain point. So they had the women come in and they say, what could we do to raise production? Well, it was a different time period when you come together with labor and you'd actually have these conversations with labor, because everybody was so not so skeptical, and fuck you, you're on another side. But they said, give us a coffee break. And like, that was unheard of. They didn't, I don't think they realized at that point in time what coffee really had achieved socially for those of us who are coffee junkies.
I wonder how true that story is.
I don't know, but I mean, it was a good story, and the guy who did it researched it pretty well.
Because the same thing, like I heard that similar, except it was for Dr. Pepper, and that's why they used the 10, 2, and 4 on their ads. Is because they had done research or whatever, and 10 o'clock was the best time for caffeine, and then 2, and then 4, and then you would be productive throughout your day.
And so I heard Dr. Pepper, like coffee, is the fucking one of the highest fucking caffeine sodas.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, that's why I said I heard something similar, but I don't know if the 10-2-4 thing is true either.
We can look into that at another point in time. I just thought that it was funny that it was the guy said it was in Denver, and there's people that have no fucking connection to Colorado at all. I mean, it was on a Joe Rogan episode. So.
My grandma worked in the fish hook factory for I can't even remember. Eagle Claw fish hooks. They're gone now, but yeah, lots of women went to the factories in World War II. So we're coming up on 45 minutes, but I want, because what you said was interesting about the insourcing of teachers. So, why don't you tell us some more about that? Because I thought it was pretty interesting.
I couldn't even fucking believe it, to be perfectly honest with you. So, like, as growing up, I really thought of all the things that I'd probably be the best at would be an educator. But for a number of reasons, in 2003, I went and tutored in Cherokee Public Schools. Some shit went down. I actually think I talked about it on a previous episode, but I couldn't have anything to do with the education system in the United States anymore. Because it's really diseducation, which is something that we've also talked about on other episodes, and something I'm sure that's going to come up a ton fucking more as time goes on. But
I would call it re-education.
Well,
disinformation.
Re-education with disinformation. Well, we'll re and dis, and we'll put the appropriate prefixes and suffixes on these various different designations.
We are teaching you to be a cog.
But either way, there are a lot of schools, because of the fact that they can't get, like, with all the testing and the bullshit, the stuff that came out of No Child Left Behind, there are certain areas where the testing has failed so much, they're having a lot of difficulties getting teachers or holding teachers in specific spaces. So we're starting to, in the United States, reach out to other countries throughout the world to bring them in. And I saw this thing specifically. It was through, what's the HBO news thing?
I don't
know. The one they have a show every day. The HBO does. Vice.
Oh, okay.
Vice did a thing on it where they were talking about there's a gal who came here in the late 80s, Filipino, and she saw essentially what was happening here with regards to a general inability to get teachers to come and to hold them. And there's this thing, I think it's called a T3 or a T9 where you can
like a visa.
Visa, yes, where you can come and you can teach for 3 years from another country. So she would create this window where she would charge these Filipinos. She would vet them seriously, and they'd have to go through a bunch of testing, and it was $12,700, and half of it was her profit, and half of it was for. And she did a lot of shit, man. She'd fly him here. She'd get up there, get their apartment set up for them. They would stay 4 to a fucking apartment, so they're not living in the best fucking conditions for those 3 years, you know.
It might not be bad compared to where they were living in the Philippines.
Which is exactly what the point was. She was talking. You said a number earlier about the difference between rupees versus 3,500 was what she was getting paid in the Philippines to teach, and when she started here, she got paid 52,000. Now the cost of living in the United States is probably going to be greater. But she's
not if they're living 4 to a place.
That's I was about to say. Yeah. The way that they're doing things, they're going to make enough money to where they she's got to pay her this one. They focused on this one gal, and she had to pay her dad back for the money that he should to cover the cost of the 12,700. But this is going to, because of the failure of people in the United States to understand the complexity of these production positions, to where this is going to continue to happen. These spaces are going to. The difference between public spaces and private spaces is really important in relation to this, because you're bringing these people in from out into these public spaces to function, where people in the United States are not actualizing their spaces in relation to that. But also, it's that we need to understand how we fit into the bigger picture of these labor movements on a global level. Because if you don't see why it is that that's going to start happening, and why it is that making arguments for $17 an hour at McDonald's is not going to help you because of these changes that are going to occur because of production positions, and then you're essentially living in a dead era. We need to get our heads.
Well, and what is really kind of fucked up about that whole thing is that, if there is a teacher listening to this right now, mm-hmm. I'm sure that when they signed up to be a teacher, and I don't know, maybe if they got tenure, they're just thinking, well, fuck it, they can't do anything to me. I've got summers off. I'm good.
Be careful.
Once that union has to sign a new contract or whatever, they might be bringing in a bunch of fucking Filipinos or Koreans or whatever.
Especially because, if you can't, and they were talking, most of the instances they were talking about were inner city Chicago, Houston, Dallas, big metropolitan, New York, they were having problems in. But where my daughter graduated from high school, they couldn't keep, and it was because of the constraints that they put on teachers with regards to testing, and also because the politicization of what you communicate about in the classroom is beginning to stymie teachers. And that's why I'm never going back, because I fucking just talked about current events, and was instructed not to talk about them anymore.
Well, Denver public schools can't find teachers. Yeah. Aurora public schools can't find teachers. Now, part of that might be because, there are some of those inner city type of areas mm-hmm. where you could get stabbed or shot or whatever. Mm-hmm. And not as much as Chicago, probably.
Yeah, anywhere in Denver's not, but Denver's getting a lot worse, dude. It's getting interesting here.
So I don't know, but now, so just keep that shit in mind. I don't think anybody's safe. Your job can be outsourced pretty much any time. You shouldn't worry about a Mexican taking your job. Worry about somebody shipping it to a Korean or a
Filipino.
Yeah.
Or having a Filipino come into and take it.
Or
no
an
matter
Indian.
What, that doesn't even fucking matter either. What you need to understand is that if you're gonna fight for a good position, you need to know where you sit in the grand scheme of things as a whole. Don't just sit there and pretend it.
Yeah. Quit worrying about one move. Worry about 6.
Yeah.
Big picture.
Chess.
Big picture.
This is all chess, folks.
All right, people. We're gonna talk about the Marvel Universe on the next episode.
On Wednesday?
On Wednesday, yes. And later this week, we're going to be talking about something else.
We might end up talking. I don't know that we really finished this discussion. I think that we might have to come back in on some of this outsourcing stuff and kind of at least wrap around on some of it. But we'll see. We'll talk more about that.
Eventually, I know that'll happen sometime, if not Friday. But we're definitely going to be talking about something exciting. We're coming up on 50 minutes now, so I would like to thank you for listening. Let us know if you've got any thoughts or comments.
Yeah,
maybe
talk some shit to us, please.
Yeah, talk some shit. So you can call us at
720-334-ROLL.
Roll. You can reach us on Twitter at Short Bus Debate and TikTok Short Bus Debate Club. So thanks again. We will talk to you later.
Adios.
Adios.